Work and Thrive, where we explore the intersection of technology, well-being, and performance. Our goal is to uncover the stories of pioneers and entrepreneurs, which are not only shaping the future of technology, but also striving to balance creativity and purpose within their journey.
I love that. I feel I'm in very esteemed company already. Thank you.
Amazing.
Well, today we're incredibly excited to be joined by Rupert Breheny, a thought leader in AI and technology integration, the founder of Cobalt AI, and a former Google veteran with over 16 years of experience in the field. He has advised brands like Alexander McQueen, Zaha Hadid Architects, and the United Nations, has been a keyword speaker across the world, and been recognized as one of the top 100 AI artists.
You know, it's so funny when you say stuff like that. The imposter syndrome is kicking in now, and it happened in a heartbeat. That's a lesson for you young ones. Goes quick.
Rupert, your career spans, as she just said, over 16 years at Google before founding Cobalt AI. Yeah. Can you take us back to the beginning?
Sure. Well, I mean, if you go to the very, very beginning, I'd say it's, I'm going to blame it on my parents. If there's one thing that I would say has marked out my career, it's just being curious about stuff. And I was lucky to grow up in a house that really valued, I think, kind of exploring ideas. So when we were kids, we used to go to art galleries, museums, stuff like this. I feel like I was born in a golden era of British television as well, because you had things like David Attenborough on the television, you know, the naturalist.
Love David.
Oh, he's amazing. He's still going.
Everyone loves David.
Who's not?
I will be so sad when he passes away.
Don't say it. That's going to happen today now.
No.
You've
It's
cursed
not.
him.
It's not. I mean, I know that obviously with AI, we're going to be able to recreate his voice in the future.
So funny enough, he's already on there. He's on YouTube, and he's issuing takedown notices as we speak. He's,
oh my God, yeah.
There's a Warhammer 40k channel that uses his voice, and they've had to cease and desist. But it was hilarious hearing him describe all these alien races. But yeah, he was very formative for me. Great scientist, but also a great communicator. And I think the other one that falls under that bracket is Carl Sagan, the American cosmologist. And I think from an early age, there was just something like magnificent and noble for me in science. And I pursued that academically. I actually trained as a marine biologist. But as anybody that has sort of chased their dreams in that fashion, you often find out quite quickly and abruptly it doesn't necessarily pay any money. And so the technology came from a bit of a switch. So that was a little later in my career, but I think it was always there because I grew up with maybe the first generation to have computing taught in the schools, and then also having a little 48K Spectrum computer at home, which is rudimentary by today's standards, but it was a programmable device in your home, and something that a lot of my friends at school loved doing. And we traded games, but also just programming tips back in the day.
So what initially drew you then to AI and technology? I mean, you were a marine biologist, and then what happened? I mean, obviously, besides the money part.
Yeah, it was as blunt as that. I think for me, as much as I enjoy the science and art disciplines in their own right, magic happens when you bring them together. And I always had the sense that technology was the best of both worlds. And having grown up in a house where everybody, my parents and my sister all have fine art degrees, they kind of pursued that. I felt like we'd done our duty for the art community. And so it fell upon me to do the science, which I did enjoy. But as part of it, I was blown away. In my final year, I actually got to write my thesis on a Mac, an Apple Mac, kind of still pretty early days. And that was quite impressive at the time because I started out handwriting essays and delivering them in person. Now, you still had to print them out. You couldn't just email them across to somebody. But you could see some of the traditional ways changing. And I had to go to the computing department and write out, I had to request in duplicate an email address at the university, and there was a whole big thing around it, but it was something was starting to happen. And this was before the web, so you didn't even have easy ways to kind of access information. If you went to the library, you would consult the indexes of scientific journals, Scientific American, Nature, New Scientist, but you would do it in these big thick volumes you would buy at the end of a year, and again towards the end of that it was on a CD-ROM that, again, you had to take out, and your name was on it. If you lost that, you cracked it, you were paying for it. So I could see it, even in these academic disciplines, technology was coming in, and it just sort of resonated with me, and I kind of found I was good at it as well. And so I was working for a non-profit doing marine research in developing countries, and I'd been out in the field, and I loved doing that. But back home, they needed somebody to network all the computers, and that was me. And I learned just enough about networking, and that was okay. And then they said, well, maybe we should have a website. And I went, well, okay, I suppose that's my job. And I learned just enough to do that. And that's when I got the bug, honestly. It was when you could, it wasn't really programming. HTML is just a markup language, but you could do something in a text editor and then put some images together. I used to, just agonize over these little pixels here and there. I used to hand anti-alias text and stuff like that. And it was just this sense of empowerment that I felt. So I had this urge to communicate things. And I was always writing, I was always telling stories. And the fact that I could do that on the web for a larger audience, and some damn fool figured out they should start paying people like me. And here we are, 16 years of Google, and then 10 years of web before that. So it's been a fun ride.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Kiana, I think we just last time talked about, back in the day we were super young and we used to always build up.
You're still young. Don't worry. Plenty years ahead of you.
No, but like 8, 9 years old. And we used to always set up websites with Euler or something, Euler.com. Yeah. And then I remember one day I would go in and like edit an HTML text that I copied from another website. And then I was able to make the background blue instead of red.
It's magic, right?
And I was like, oh my God, I'm like this crazy hacker. I don't know, when I was like 9 years old. And I think that's when we also got the bug, right?
A success story based on just trying out new things. And I think it's always amazing to start a passion with just trying it out, like not only just taking courses, but just go and discover your curiosity about it.
Absolutely.
That's the right way of doing it. The world is built by and belongs to makers, and the more you lean into that and just see what to, I mean, this is something I tell people. This I write a lot, and I think you've seen some of my LinkedIn posts, and I quite often get some fairly harsh critique, let's say, from creative industries as well. And the thing I tell them is just play with it. Maybe this isn't for you, but at least you can find out. You can do something you haven't done before. And that moment you have where you realize the power you've unlocked, you can turn your career on that moment, but you can make life better for other people as well, which is an exciting place to be.
Absolutely. And I mean, we love your posts on LinkedIn, and there's always critics out there on the internet. It's kind of like a natural thing that where there might be people behind the screens just not kind of appreciating the passion behind it and like exploration and trying to kind of like always see things more in a negative light, perhaps, or in a way that they are not that open for technology and change.
I think it depends very much on your worldview. If change is an opportunity or a risk, and if you're feeling a little uncertain in your career or there's been layoffs in your company, I can absolutely understand why people would be maybe on the back foot with this stuff. But the guaranteed way for making the bad things happen is just to put your fingers in the air and pretend that it never will happen, just because you're, keeping your head out of that world. But I get it too. And again, my sister with her art, she still paints. I mean, she's fantastic. She's a great artist. She does these beautiful pet portraits. And we had a portrait off a couple of years ago, early days of Midjourney, and she illustrated somebody's pet. She does these beautiful paintings. I did my version with a prompt, and it just lacked the charm. It didn't have the finesse of her work. So there was no way that you would pick me over her work. So I think good art will stand above that. And I think people need to kind of wrap their heads around the fact that if this is done correctly, and we're talking about AI more broadly and generative AI specifically, it shouldn't replace anybody. You hear these words come up over and again. It enhances, it elevates, it augments. And who doesn't want to be enhanced, elevated, or augmented? So I think you just have to choose the future. It's going to happen, whether you choose your path through it or not. So I'm glad that you're exploring this, and I would encourage anybody else to do the same.
Yes, as having technologies serve human creativity rather than replacing it. That's absolutely, I think there's actually a project of mine going on with a friend where we generate data-based art with Dolly, but we have an artist as well who looks at the images, and he paints his own art inspired by the generated AI image,
nice.
which is kind of like a new layer of creativity where you get inspired by something and just, turn into your own idea. And there's been very much positive reactions about it to kind of this ending the cycle to put the digital back into the physical form.
Yeah, that's great. Funnily enough, with the art reference, I think it's today. I want to say Christie's, could be Sotheby's, but there's an auction of artwork, AI-inspired artwork going on just now. And there was, the detractors, some groups of artists came out and they said they should cancel this. But they didn't. That. Yeah, so you have Rafik Andol, who's now world famous. And I think he has something on permanent collection in MoMA in New York, and you see his stuff around. And he speaks very articulately about this, the irony, articulately about this. But the stuff that you're doing, that sort of data-driven stuff, is fascinating to me. You're unlocking new ways of kind of exploring. And I think art and science do that. They find ways to not package, but filter the world in a way that we can wrap our heads around it. And I would never criticize somebody for finding new ways of doing that. And a lot of the artists they're not just doing Midjourney. They're submitting their own images into data sets, training, and then hacking the stuff that they've trained. And so there's this knee-jerk reaction against the AI, which I think is disappointing because it's the greatest opportunity we've had in our lives. And I say that having lived through, it was a bit too late for the space race, but I saw that with the web. And then to have 2 bites of that cherry, to get a second chance in my career, and you growing up and having this at the beginning is incredibly exciting. But you cannot let this pass you by. There's a huge opportunity cost. I'm glad that I think a lot of, your audience are going to get that, and they're going to be playfully exploring, which is what I recommend everybody does.
You've been named one of the top AI artists, actually. So can you tell us also more about your creative work?
Even though you just said you cannot be compared to your sister, but I mean, it is is a pretty cool title to have.
Well, it was purely accidental. I mean, people compile these lists on the internet, and I think that more speaks to the fact that I was an early adopter. I have rapidly and resoundingly been surpassed by many people with art backgrounds. I think partly, not to diminish my effort in the space, most of the people involved with this early were technologists, and so they put up with the technical hurdles to create imagery. But I always tried to make nice pictures, and I never wanted to create stuff you'd seen before. There was no real interest for me to kind of do stuff. And I have there's a lot of beautiful, pretty pictures, particularly from Midjourney. And I didn't want to do pretty or beautiful. So I came out with, maybe slightly more challenging stuff and unusual and odd-looking people. And this caught the eye of Vogue magazine. So a couple of years ago, I was approached. I was on holiday. It was one of these perfect scenarios. I was in a chalet in the mountains, and this message from Vogue comes in, and they like to collaborate. So I did a series of images around what a Vogue cover could look like. And the first, I spoke to, we got some art direction in, and we talked about maybe filming modern celebrities, but with the photographers, the famous photographers from 100 years ago. And we tried some stuff and it looked okay, but it felt like it had been done before. And so I wound up just, let's do something crazy. What can't you do in real life? And I made a series of dresses and like fire and coral and bubbles and coffee and just stuff like this. I was trying to get things looking like they're in, zero gravity and stuff like that. Didn't quite nail it. The closest I get were these like silk. If you can wear silk and prompt that there's a fan blowing and stuff like that. The kind of thing you would do in a photo shoot. And that was a cover. It was on their homepage for a week. Not the magazine, sadly. But that stuff, I think the exposure there. And then I made a commitment which lasted for about 18 months, which was to make one AI art piece every day and write a story. And the funny thing was, even if the image was generated. The story was always written by me, but just having, for the first time in my life, really, what some maybe grandiosely would call an artistic practice, it made me really kind of struggle for ideas and realize the sort of agony of the creative process. And then sometimes it was 10 minutes before midnight and you'd get something out and it's not what you'd imagine, but that's the one that resonates. And having that live feedback from people on Instagram and LinkedIn and just what seemed to sort of people enjoyed was actually part of it. Now, some people say it's vulgar, you have to create for yourself, but I think there's something interesting about having almost immediate feedback from a community. And I loved that there was a community of people both talking about that technology, but I longed for more conversations around why did you do this? What is the meaning of this image? Why is there a red donkey over there? Stuff like that. And I think early on, more people kind of caught up on the technical aspects. But now the artists and the photographers and the painters are using these tools. I think the quality of the work is gone up a lot more. So maybe I'm in the top 1,000 artists at this point.
Okay. With your own company, Cobalt, I think one of the focuses that you also have is to kind of empower people to do things better with AI, right? Can you talk a little bit about this? And can you also talk about maybe how AI will change the way we work?
Sure. So
2 big questions.
oh, let me try and do that in 2 minutes. I found myself in this. I had a lull, I would say, my Google career. I'd done some amazing, beautiful, creative work with photographers. We would do like this amazing marketing material. We'd have catering budgets, somebody coming in doing makeup and getting all these beautiful shots and recordings on set and stuff like this. And then for the last 3 years of my career, I was doing spreadsheets, more or less, and it was kind of tedious. It was important stuff. It had real business value. We were crunching numbers for the big advertisers and figuring out where the biggest opportunities were. But there was a lot of SQL queries and really back to the data you were talking about. And so around this time, we had Lambda. This predates Bard and Gemini. But then also ChatGPT came out shortly after, and it was quite good at SQL. And
do you think SQL is dead?
Oh, God, I hope so. I hope a lot of coding is dead.
Yeah, SQL.
Yeah, right? Nobody's got time for that. It's nonsense. But it's useful. I mean, I have it on my phone. I have this sort of database. So I know how important it is. But I don't have the time, inclination, or skill set to do particularly elegant queries. And when you realize you could just get this machine to do it for you, that was very liberating. So if you can find the boring stuff, the stuff that you hate doing at work, and can find some way of automating it, and then that frees you to do the stuff that you love doing, and it puts you in a better mood. It's more fun for your coworkers. You can swap tips. And I think the weird thing, if you're in the C-suite at work and you do not have an official policy on AI yet, it's too late because the workers already are, and they're probably pasting stuff into chatbots they shouldn't be. So better get ahead of that curve because it will come up from the grassroots, which is, a good way for it to come. But it's just this wave that's going to happen to everybody. And I would encourage everybody to do that. In terms of what it looks like integrating for themselves, well, it depends on your business. A lot of stuff, the kind of things that feel repetitive, chances are there is some kind of task workflow you can build around that. And there's a whole bunch of AI tools out there, even if it's just using a large language model, or there may be specific apps or tools for that individual use case. But start exploring that. And if there's nothing off the shelf, just find somebody on Reddit or YouTube or somebody like myself that can help you build these workflows too. You'll be so glad you did. I mean, it's not just there's money to be made for sure, when you can, every project benefits from streamlining, but just the sort of mental weight off your shoulders when you can concentrate on the stuff that, to my mind, provides real business value, which is the creativity, flexibility, leadership, relationship building, stuff that you can't automate with AI, but which I think is so important for the working world.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
Work smarter, not harder.
There you go.
I mean,
that's better. I should have done that.
I mean, it would have been a much more concise answer, but thank you for elaborating. I mean, with so much noise around AI, what is one misconception about AI in the workspace that frustrates you the most?
Yeah. This came up again just recently. Somebody had gone to court with some absolutely made up, hallucinated court cases, which is nuts. And so I think people have a very naive approach to a large language model, for example, where they see it almost as an extension of a search engine, and they will type in that one phrase. And I think you have to be really critical in terms of you're not going to get it first time. So you would want to iterate your query and then check everything that comes out. And a lot of the hallucination you can edit out. You can just tell it to make sure you can find a link to things. It's insane as it sounds. You can tell it to fact check itself. Or there's this magic phrase, apparently, take a breath. And it allows some chain of thought to kind of take place in these more sophisticated reasoning models. And if you learn how to speak in a more nuanced way, and you only really learn that by experimenting, you can get much better results. So I would say that the misconception is don't take the first answer. Treat AI almost like an intern, where it can be a little unruly or it doesn't know the rules yet, and you just have to nudge it in that direction. But over time, you can change a data set if you're using something just dedicated from your work life, or the prompts that, I have a library of these now, but every time I think, I should have put that in there, and I'll update it. I have a list, I keep a database of these, and it just gets a little bit better each time. So explore this stuff for fun, but aware there are hallucinations possible, and start a conversation. It's a back and forth. It's a conversation with an AI, not just a declaration.
Okay. I was actually just thinking about the agent revolution that everybody's talking about. Agentic
something
AI.
that I really do not like is that people say they think RPA is equal to agents, which it's not.
Tell me what RPA means.
Robotic process automation.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So just having a predefined workflow does not equal an agent, in my opinion, because an agent always figures out the workflow for itself, Yeah. So that's what makes me personally, is for me one of the biggest misconceptions that we have nowadays.
Got it. Do you feel people are over, are our expectations too high, that we assume these things are going to do too much for us? We don't put the bar at the right level?
I have to be honest, we have also talked about this, but I think agents are definitely the future, but we are nowhere near where they will be able to be in the future.
I tested some of these a couple of years ago at Google, a little similar to what I think OpenAI has operated, where it uses basically a visual website as the API of the future. You take something that's made for humans, but now the tools we have adapt to them. And we were testing things like cinema bookings, restaurant bookings, and stuff like that. And you could follow along as it went through the page, but it was rough. And it did not surprise me that it didn't really launch. Google's great at research. They're not so good at productizing, and they're quite bad at launching, sadly. They've been trying to crack this one for years. So I think you're right. We're not there yet. But when it does kick in, and when you get I've been very impressed with the level of reasoning with, the Gemini 2 models. Apparently O3 for OpenAI has a lot of this. Perplexity is really good. And you can see it. It will walk you through. It shows you the chain of reasoning it uses. And it's like, I think it will get faster very soon. I think we can trust it. But there's that little bit, you have to trust it 99.9. 99% doesn't do it. It needs to be the 1 in 1,000. There's always that human in the loop. You get, if it has your credit card, you definitely want to check it before it hits submit.
Definitely.
But I think it's interesting that you just said the 99.9% for it to be accurate. But they're humans. I don't know. Do you think all of your employees are 99.9% accurate?
No, and I think we will hold these devices to a higher standard. In a sense, it's you're tried in the court of public opinion, and every time a Tesla sort of bumps some old lady walking a dog, it's in the news, and I understand that. But there's something like 30,000 people die every year in automotive accidents in the US, and all of those don't get reported. So it almost has to be a factor of 10 better. I think there's an order of magnitude to this. And ultimately, a lot of these systems won't just save time or money, they will save lives when you consider the sort of people getting incorrect diagnoses or cancer scans, missing stuff, or mammograms, whatever you have. We're going to get past this and then realize it becomes dangerous not to use these systems. Now, you can choose not to. I mean, some people choose not to give their kids any kind of medicine and they die in the modern age, or vaccines. But I would encourage everybody to participate in the modern world.
If you could give one piece of advice to aspiring innovators and entrepreneurs, what would it be?
Oh, it's just, I use that phrase earlier. A friend of mine, we kind of came up with this just in a conversation like this. Playful exploration, I love. It's what humans do so well. That's how we learn. That's what play is for. It allows you to learn in a low stakes environment. And I think we should do more of it. I think it's good for your health. The thing is, we get scared. You have to bear in mind a lot of these things. You're not going to burn the company to the ground if you just start kind of toying with these tools. And so just take them out for a test run and don't judge yourself too harshly. There's research apparently that the C-level, they don't want to look dumb in front. Well, nobody does. I mean, let's face it. I've had a long career of looking dumb in rooms full of people much smarter than me. But I've also been in rooms where people don't ask, like, what does RPA sound like? Because they don't want to look like they don't know. But sometimes you just got to ask the basic stuff.
So important to ask questions.
Yeah. But if you can do it in a way where the stakes are lower, I think that's a nice place to be. And it's fun. It's just, I know we're all busy, but if you can take 10 minutes to maybe watch a YouTube video or find a channel that you like. And then if something kind of resonates with you, you can do something. And it might be, animating your holiday photos or something from your past, or working on that screenplay you had sort of left in a drawer for a bit. If you've got creative work, it's incredible to get somebody just to look. I do research. I'm sort of obsessed with these serial killer diagrams now. I'm trying to develop my systems thinking. So I draw lots of boxes and arrows and I just say, is this right? And I take a screen grab and I send it to Gemini and it tells me like, well, maybe you've missed waste management in here. And it's incredible. It's absolutely phenomenal. So if you see it as a creative partner, not as a threat, and then you just enter into a dialogue with it, I think that's a great way of approaching things. So just don't be scared. The water's fine. Come in. It's lovely. There's no sharks and you might have fun.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rupert. So where can people find your work and learn more about what you're doing at Cobalt AI?
So most of the stuff I post, I think as you mentioned earlier, is on LinkedIn. I have a few Medium articles that are longer form, but I have one great advantage. I wasn't sure about it as a kid, but my name is unique. So if you look up Rupert Breheny, Breheny, on LinkedIn, you will find me. And I post all the good stuff there. And I try and engage a lot with the commenters. I've had some great friendships and some lovely chats with people on there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rupert, for taking the time. It was a lovely conversation. And we're super excited for you to be our first pancake.
Well, thank you. I'm honored. And I just want to say you've done a fantastic job. I love the way the two of you interact. It's a really fun conversation. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to the Tech and Thrive podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at techandthrive_podcast. And if you want to support the podcast, shoot us an email at info@kimiana.co.